Frostpunk 2 is much more of a society economic game than a survival city builder like its predecessor. Surviving against the cold isn't as much of a concern as balancing your economy is. Just when you think you have the game figured out, in come whiteouts to throw a complete wrench in all of your hard work. While they don't work quite like a final boss as seen in the first game, whiteouts are a real wake-up call to avoid complacency and to continually plan for the future. In this short Frostpunk 2 guide, we'll be talking about various strategies I have used to protect the most essential part of the city, its economy. So where most guides talk about balancing the fuel, food, materials, and goods aspect of the economy, there is one critical aspect. You need workforce to supply all of these. Population gains are fairly sporadic and ultimately add more burden on your economy, thus you'll need more just to sustain what you have. But losses due to deaths and sickness will quickly grind your city to a halt before you realize that your last checkpoint save was hours ago, and the autosave just fired about a minute ago. So the critical part of surviving whiteouts is to prevent your workforce from getting too cold, as you'll get a loss of trust due to deaths, but perhaps even worse, is that the majority of your workforce will get sick and be unable to work. Not only that, but this will also cause tension in the city, and can snowball if it grows too much. Of the game's 5 city problems of hunger, disease, cold, squalor, and crime, cold and disease will rise the most rapidly and directly affect your workforce. Cold will rise rapidly if you have homelessness and/or a heat deficit. It will start to cause frequent deaths if it rises too much, in addition to raising disease. So fuel should be your top priority, then food, and everything else can come later. By default, coal and steam provide 1 heat per unit of fuel, while oil provides 2. So oil should be prioritized in any equal exchange from an outpost. If you have coal liquefaction, then you should try to use it as much as possible, since it effectively doubles your coal's heat output with a small cost of materials and workforce. And this is even factoring in research upgrades which would improve your heat efficiency with oil. If you have adaptive pumps, then you can use whichever you have access to, as you can just switch which fuel is optimized. I like to use oil until it runs out and then switch to coal. This effectively doubles my usable fuel storage. You should aim to have over 70 weeks of other supplies like food in your storage, as even late game whiteouts won't last any longer. This will let you shut down their districts completely to save fuel without crippling your economy. It's hard to really estimate how much fuel you will need stockpiled, as heat demand skyrockets when the storm hits, which will make it difficult to produce enough fuel when the temperature drops. In addition, you will also lose access to most outposts. So just get into the habit of building a few storage depots as your city grows. Also, coal and oil have separate storage levels, but both gain storage from fuel depots. Plus, this will reduce the workforce demand if you place them right. Once again, just try to be in the habit of building storage throughout the playthrough. City laws can also give you an edge in managing your economy during a whiteout, so try to pass laws like heat pipe watch, weather-adjusted shifts, and heat recycling to reduce heat demand. Also, the foraged food additives won't work during whiteouts, so you might want to consider changing some laws temporarily for the good of your city. Naturally, the overdrive and emergency shifts are an obvious policy, as you can use them to temporarily increase output. However, if you use them for too long, you'll start to get deaths, which will greatly reduce your trust, raise tensions, and obviously you'll lose some of your critical workforce. If the generator stress goes over 80%, you'll start to get accidents, which will kill or injure hundreds of your citizens at a time. This game does not provide you with very much warning when your generator stress is going too high, so this easily can happen without you noticing. Unlike Frostpunk 1, you will not get a game over if the generator stress goes over 100%, but you will get frequent malfunctions, so just try to keep an eye on it. It is still a good idea to use overdrive to improve fuel efficiency to extend your fuel reserves. With upgrades and a good economy, you might even be able to produce fuel surplus during a whiteout. You can save a lot of heat demand by reducing the workforce in non-housing districts, and manually shutting down non-essential buildings and hubs. However, you should keep in mind that reducing workforce in housing districts and other districts with housing buildings will cause those districts to lose the housing that they provide, so you may end up with homelessness when you lose workforce. One key point here is that districts will only provide heat adjacency bonuses if they are on, so if you reduce their workforce to a minimum, you will still get the full bonus without most of their heat and materials demand, unlike when you totally shut them off. Another key point is that issues will only increase if their supply level is below common. So, in other words, as long as you are supplying most of the demand, even with a deficit, then the issue won't get any worse. Logistics districts are a go-to for a shutdown since exploration and most outposts will be blocked during a whiteout, rendering their entire district useless. Next up are non-oil producing industrial districts. Factories could be manually shut down individually, but it's much easier to reduce the workforce in the district. It would be a good idea to specialize a district by concentrating factories or oil producers in the same district for simplicity, and this also reduces the number of emergency ships that you need to issue. Goods deficit will only lead to crime, which grows fairly slowly and can easily be offset with more guards and prisons. This means that goods can easily wait until after a whiteout. Extraction districts often come with high heat demand, so I prefer to shut down non-fuel producing districts to save fuel. A materials deficit will cause squalor, but again, its effects can be controlled in the short term with better healthcare and building prefabs. Food production also uses a lot of heat, so again, I like to shut them down to the minimum. While this will cause a food deficit leading to hunger, which can cause disease and cause deaths, this issue grows fairly slowly. And as with every resource in the game, you should always try to have a healthy stockpile. Different whiteouts come with different random hazards, which will significantly affect another aspect of your economy. So you might get a storm that reduces food production, one that causes material demand in housing districts, or ones that reduce your coal or oil production. If your fuel reserves can last until the end of the storm, then you can afford to keep any of your other districts running. And in the end, there really isn't much more to surviving the storm other than riding it out. Just remember the hierarchy of needs, that heat and shelter come first, then disease, food, materials, and lastly goods.